Prepare yourself. This is a story about depravity, cunning, and a level of cold-bloodedness that's hard to fathom. We're talking about acts of unspeakable cruelty. A perfect crime spree, orchestrated with a twisted brilliance, that allowed a serial killer to operate for 15 years without a single arrest, without even a solid suspect. The crimes were sickening. Each victim died after suffering the ultimate humiliation. Even pregnant women weren't spared. The killer didn't hesitate to extinguish the life of the unborn child. He was judge, jury, and executioner. And for 15 years, he got away with it. He was untouchable. The statute of limitations ran out. The case went cold. Everyone thought it was over. A dark chapter closed. But then, a bombshell. A press conference was suddenly announced. And the content of that press conference was more shocking than anyone could have imagined. The person responsible for those horrific serial killings was a top celebrity. An A-list star, loved and adored by millions, is now at the peak of his career. And he didn't just confess. He boasted. He revealed that he documented every single crime, every act of violence, the whole process of killing, laid out in excruciating detail. He called it research disguised as a guide for women on how to prevent crime. He then turned it into a book with an absolutely insane title, I Am the Killer. And this book, it was going on sale, available to everyone, every fan, every member of the public, online, in stores. Everyone could buy a copy. Understandably, the press and fans were in disbelief. But here's the disturbing part. The backlash everyone expected never happened. Instead of condemnation and outrage, the hardcore fans went even crazier for him. They thought he must be feeling remorse for his past actions. He's owning up to his faults, they said. And with this press conference, every media outlet in the country started reporting on it. But there was one person who wasn't celebrating. The detective who worked on the original case. The detective had been haunted by these murders for 15 years. But something didn't add up. How could the perpetrator still be so young after all this time? The journalists weren't stupid. Someone had the guts to ask the question. One journalist challenged the star, Dusak, on stage. Is there any evidence to show that you were the person who committed the murders 15 years ago? What happened next shocked everyone. Dusak immediately presented his x-rays to all the journalists. And there, clear as day, was a bullet lodged in his shoulder. Dusak then proceeded to take off his shirt in front of the cameras, exposing his scars. He claimed that a detective shot him during the investigation, that the bullet was still inside his shoulder. The metal detector would beep if they scanned him. The journalists went wild, scrambling to get photos. When the press conference wrapped up, the book I Am the Killer became a bestseller overnight. It flew off the shelves. Everyone bought a copy. The company he was with made a fortune. But for all the people celebrating, others were grieving. Dusak was reveling in his fame, but the families of the victims were filled with rage, wanting to tear him apart limb from limb. The only difference is that Dusak is riding high, mocking death and the police. But what Dusak doesn't realize is that a person struggling with their own life is always on the edge of the knife. But when people struggling with their lives gather together, it's a power that can swallow a dragon. So as Dusak goes door to door apologizing to the victims' families and making charitable donations for underprivileged children, the victims' families were getting organized. But in the beginning, there was just a handful willing to join in on the revenge. They come up with a plan: kidnap Dusak, take him back to a secluded place, torture him slowly, get him to reveal the location of the final bodies, especially the mother of one of the victims, Eun-hai, who can't accept that her daughter has died, insisting on seeing the body before her life would come to peace. So they say what they mean, planning the kidnapping. Dusak obviously is completely clueless. Hyung-gu, who also joined the plan, is waiting for Dusak. You see, Dusak murdered Hyung-gu's wife. When Dusak saw Hyung-gu, he didn't stop taunting him, asking why he looked so sad, telling him to smile more. Dusak sees Hyung-gu spit on his hand. Clearly, he's getting under his skin. So Dusak goes over to Hyung-gu and whispers something in his ear. This pushes Hyung-gu past the breaking point. Seeing the killer about to leave, Hyung-gu asks if he's eaten. Without waiting for a response, he throws a whole bowl of black bean noodles right in Dusak's face. Hyung-gu remembers the previous arrest of Dusak. He recalls that he's good at running and fighting. The moment you're about to catch him, he launches a sneak attack. Like today, he whispered the same words from years ago. I haven't killed you yet. You're a good billboard, a good advertisement for me. Just as Hyung-gu is losing it, his phone rings. It's the biggest newspaper in the area, inviting him to a debate. It turns out they've also invited Dusak. Hours earlier, to increase viewership, the director of the local newspaper invited the two archenemies to participate in a debate. The marketing ploy works really well. When Do-sok arrives, his die-hard fans are going crazy. On the other side is everyone who wants to see Do-sok suffer. Do-sok, when going in, also signs an autograph for every fan in line. All the fans are waiting, Do-sok and his carefree attitude. The fact that he's not getting arrested or punished made Hyung-gu angry. Do-sok doesn't realize that a plan is happening that he is unaware of. Several days later, Do-sok is about to go to the pool to do some stretching. Next to him is a janitor who looked at him quietly. He goes to the pool to release some snakes. He opened the bottom of the bucket and revealed the snakes. And the snakes are swimming to Do-sok. But just as he was about to leave, he noticed a snake stuck in a crack. Luckily, the two security guards on basic wages next to him didn't notice this scene. And Do-sok, who was swimming here, also didn't notice anything unusual and was still happily splashing around in the water. But unexpectedly, just as he surfaced, a snake suddenly lunged at him and bit him in the face. And this scene also frightened the two security guards on the shore, who hurriedly helped Do-sok out of the lake. Seeing this, the two security guards hurriedly helped Do-sok downstairs and called an ambulance, wanting to take Do-sok to the hospital for emergency treatment. But at this time, they didn't know that the medical staff in front of them were all disguised as relatives of the victims, precisely to kidnap Do-sok. And the people here were also seeing their plan about to succeed. But unexpectedly, a real ambulance arrived from behind. Seeing that his teammates' identities were about to be revealed, Soo-yeon told her teammates to go first, while she stayed behind to cover their retreat. When Soo-yeon saw that the car had driven out, she hurriedly followed behind the car, and the driver slammed on the brakes, causing one of the pursuers to fall. And at the same time, the police also received the news and quickly drove on the road to search for the kidnappers. Although he knew Do-sok's crimes were heinous and unforgivable, the statute of limitations had now expired, and as long as he didn't reoffend during this time, the other party was just an ordinary person. And he, as a police officer protecting the safety of the other party, was also a part of his professional requirements. But just as he drove to chase after them, an ambulance suddenly swerved past him on the road. And in that moment, he also noticed the people in the car, who were the relatives of the victims from back then. So, seeing this scene, he immediately turned his car around and chased after them. But he didn't know that the team leader wasn't fighting alone, but that several relatives of the victims had also participated in this action. And Do-sok, who had been unconscious, also woke up. In this moment, seeing that everyone wasn't paying attention to him, he vaguely intended to take the scalpel in the box, but was almost discovered several times in a row. Do-sok had to temporarily give up, but the violent shaking of the car caused the knife to fly out of the box. Along with another collision from Hyung-gu, the knife also fell straight into Do-sok's shoulder. He quietly held the scalpel in his hand, waiting for Hyung-gu's next collision. As expected, this time Hyung-gu directly crashed into the back frame. Do-sok also knew that he couldn't miss the opportunity, and then stabbed Soo-yeon next to him with the knife. But unexpectedly, Do-sok fell into Hyung-gu's car, which clearly made them unacceptable. After that, Soo-yeon, next to him, also picked up the knife and stood up, jumping onto the roof of Hyung-gu's car and stabbing at Do-sok. But Do-sok twisted his body to dodge, and almost stabbed Hyung-gu to death. So Soo-yeon was also in the car, constantly chasing and killing from the tail of the car to the front of the car. Seeing this, the team leader in front also slammed on the brakes, and immediately, momentum tossed the two people into the car. So Do-sok also hit his head on the oxygen tank and passed out. But the people behind clearly couldn't just give up like that, and also stepped on the gas to chase after them. But unexpectedly, Soo-yeon grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed it straight into their faces. At this point, the situation completely spiraled out of control. Waiting for Hyung-gu to wake up after his daze, the team leader and his comrades had long since left. So, after returning to the police station, Hyung-gu, a crowd of reporters was also vying to ask him if he had caught the kidnapper. But Hyung-gu didn't reveal at all that it was the victim's relatives, but went to the office and discussed with some colleagues how to rescue Do-sok. But now they couldn't even find the other party's location, let alone rescue him. They also checked the other party's phone and license plate number, but they were all fake, so they couldn't find the address. But at this time, Hyung-gu thought of something, saying that even an ambulance could be fake. So, the whole team realized this anomaly. Hyung-gu immediately ordered his subordinate colleague Do-hyuk to conduct an investigation. The result was as expected, and soon after, they found out that the ambulance used by the other party was a prop car of a film crew, and the person who rented the car was a man named Han. Very quickly, they located Han's location, so Hyung-gu here also immediately followed his subordinate's instructions and quickly drove to chase after him. However, just as Do-hyuk said that he would lead people to block the road, Hyung-gu told Do-hyuk to wait in place and wait for him to contact him again. It was clear that he didn't know what Hyung-gu was planning, and Hyung-gu, after hanging up, also followed the other party to a deep mountain area. Seeing that the other party had arrived, he quietly put on night vision goggles. And the group of the victim's relatives at this time also poured a basin of water on Dusok to wake him up. But at this time, Hyung-gu had quietly gone up to the attic, and here he also began to come in front of Dusok and ask where her daughter's body was. However, before she could ask 2 questions, Hyung-gu in the attic cut off the power switch, immediately making the downstairs pitch black. Hyung-gu slowly walked in front of everyone, using night vision goggles to approach Dusok step by step, and then used a knife to cut the ropes on his body. But at this time, Eun-hae, on the opposite side, seemed to have realized something and waved her hand forward. But luckily, Hyung-gu dodged in time. Waiting until they turned on the lights, they discovered that Hyung-gu had carried Dusok away. After that, Soo-yeon picked up a bow and arrow and fired wildly, but Hyung-gu cleverly dodged them all. So, in the end, Soo-yeon could only watch Hyung-gu drive away. After saving Dusok, Hyung-gu also left a note in front of him, on which was clearly written that if he didn't want to die, he shouldn't cause trouble. After that, Dusok also received an interview from a reporter, asking Dusok if he knew who had kidnapped him. But Dusok intended that it was his fan, because they loved him so much that they did something so extreme, so he wouldn't pursue the other party's responsibility. And Hyung-gu at this time had also returned to the police station, and his colleagues also asked what had happened. Why was Dusok on TV now? Wasn't he supposed to be brought back to the station? But Hyung-gu, hearing this, glossed over the matter and then intended to turn around and leave. But unexpectedly, a woman suddenly entered the police station, and that person was Eun-hae. The anger in her eyes had materialized, confirming that there was a scratch mark on his neck from last night, and then she slapped Hyung-gu. And Hyung-gu, looking at Eun-hae, clearly also felt guilty. Time passed very quickly, and it was time for the discussion about the book I Am a Murderer, and this discussion was also of concern to countless people. First, someone stood up to ask a question, because this book was selling very well. The revenue had now exceeded 20 billion won. So did Dusok kill people just to sell books? Isn't selling the book in the name of a confession really a clever marketing ploy? After that, Hyung-gu also repeatedly questioned Dusok, asking him if he remembered what he had said to him the night the 2 of them were chasing. But when faced with his questions, as long as they were small details, Dusok often answered evasively or pretended not to remember. So the atmosphere at the scene also became extremely strange. Seeing this, the host, in order to ease the emotions of both sides, also began the connection part, seeing if the audience in front of the screen had anything to say. And the first person to call was a woman. It seemed that she was hesitant to reveal her identity. The audience member said she was a fan of Dusok and had a few things she wanted to ask. She wondered if he knew that Hyung-gu ran very fast, and had he taken advantage of the rooftops and alleys to escape from Hyung-gu? And then that person said something that made the entire hall and the viewers confused. He told Dusok to stop acting, because he was the real murderer. Hearing this, Hyung-gu was frightened to the point of turning pale, because his mother was still at home, so he immediately drove home. However, when he returned home, there was a note hanging on the door. Clearly seeing this scene, Hyung-gu was also stunned, so angry that he began to smash things in the room. However, at this time, the door to the room next door quietly opened, and seeing his mother appear, Hyung-gu at this time finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, at this time, he saw that someone in the room across the street was waving at him. Seeing this, Hyung-gu also immediately went to the room across the street. But when he barely managed to get there, he found that the other party had escaped. However, the other party left 2 pieces of evidence on the chair. Seeing this, Hyung-gu also immediately turned on the videotape, and the content inside was his wife, Mi-jin, being tortured to death by the other party. After that, in the film, Mi-jin said that before dying, she wanted to hear Hyung-gu's voice. Seeing this scene, Hyung-gu also couldn't hold back his tears. Finally, the scene that horrified him was a person named Jae holding a knife, slowly approaching his wife. And Mi-jin was frantically begging, saying that she didn't want to die, and there was also a reason why she couldn't be killed, which was that she was pregnant with Hyung-gu's child. And the film also ended here. Hyung-gu, after watching it, was also extremely saddened, but he also tried to suppress his grief and began to look for clues in the tape. Listening carefully to every detail in the tape, he unexpectedly actually found a clue. So he immediately convened a press conference, announcing that they had received the murderer's murder weapon. The bloodstains on it completely matched his DNA, which could prove that this knife was the murder weapon from back then. As for why the book that Dusok wrote was exactly the same as the development of the case from back then, if he wasn't the person involved, then he definitely couldn't have written it. They were still investigating this matter, and still couldn't determine who was the real mastermind of this perfect case. And the editorial office at this time was also watching the news on TV, because two murderers had appeared. They also couldn't distinguish who the real culprit was, and the staff at the scene also began to discuss their opinions. Some said it was Jay, some asserted it was Dusak. But at this time, the editor-in-chief stood up, ordering the staff to invite both of them to confront each other. The man next to him, hearing this, also felt speechless, because the first two were still easy to invite, but even the police couldn't find Jay, so where would he know to find him? But the boss was still the boss, and the idea was extremely clear, which was that although they didn't have contact information, they could post an advertisement. A high-profile advertisement would definitely make Jay see their invitation. The result was as expected, and not long after the news was released, the editorial office received a call from Jay, and Jay also invited them to the rooftop to directly say that he would agree to the station's request. By then, the three of them would have a national discussion to see who was the real murderer. Clearly, at this time, Jay was very unhappy with Dusak making money brazenly and taking away the fruits of his perfect case. After saying this, he also sent the station staff a videotape, and the content on it was the burial site of a body. 3 hours before the live broadcast began, the address would be sent to them and the group of the victims' relatives. At this time, they were also preparing for the debate. As long as they confirmed who the murderer was, Eun-hye would kill that person with her own hands. And the way to kill him was by using snake venom hidden in a fountain pen. And very quickly, the debate here also began. But at the scene, there were only two people because Jay still hadn't arrived. So, the host had to let the victims' family members speak to buy time. Luckily, not long after Jay arrived at the editorial office, under the guidance of the staff, he slowly entered the hall. And he always wore a mask. And everyone at the scene was also staring at the person called Jay. But the host asked him to take off his mask to prove his existence. When the mask was taken off, Hyung-gu, next to him, also spoke, asking if his wife, Mi-jin, was still alive. But Jay told him to wait a bit longer, and he would know. And at this time, Dusak, next to him, also spoke up, saying that the fact that he killed 10 people was the truth. Perhaps the other people were killed by Jay. But Jay didn't panic at all, but looked behind him, telling the people at the station that they could start broadcasting live now. So, the camera also followed the positioning to a forest area, where countless staff were digging, and underground was Mi-jin, who had been murdered 15 years ago but whose body hadn't been found. At this time, she was only left with a white skeleton. So with this ironclad evidence, Dusak was also completely exonerated. But Dusak also had some female fans who clearly didn't want to believe that their idol wasn't the culprit. They said that Dusak should prove that what Jay was saying was false. Seeing this, Dusak also had to tell the truth, which was that he wasn't the real culprit of the serial murder case. Receiving Dusak's denial, the host was even more curious. If Dusak wasn't the culprit, then how did he know the murder details that only the culprit would know? However, Dusak's next answer shocked everyone, which was that the author of this book wasn't actually him but Hyung-gu. So, hearing the answer, everyone at the scene was also in an uproar. Because even if they were stupid, they could tell that this was clearly Dusak and Hyung-gu's plan. The purpose was to lure the real culprit, Jay, to show his face. And Hyung-gu also revealed Dusak's real identity, which was the son of the first victim. So, hearing this, Jay also felt that he had been tricked, because Hyung-gu had completely grasped his psychology, which was that, in his heart, he extremely wanted to be noticed by others, including the murder case from back then. Now, as long as someone became famous through that book and took away his result, then he definitely wouldn't be able to restrain himself and would stand out, falling into the trap that they had painstakingly set up. Hearing Hyung-gu's description, Jay wasn't panicked at all, because he knew that the statute of limitations had now passed. He was just an ordinary person, and Hyung-gu couldn't do anything to him. But what he didn't expect was that Hyung-gu would turn on the videotape that he had given him. When the volume was turned up, there was a very small sound announcing the time, and that time was 15 minutes from the time the 15-year statute of limitations was over. So, hearing this, Jay couldn't laugh anymore, and Hyung-gu also immediately pulled out his gun and arrested Jay. But at this time, Jay was like he was repenting and knelt down in front of Hyung-gu, but unexpectedly, he said the same pleading words that his wife had said back then, saying that if he killed him, then he would also be killing his child. Clearly seeing this scene, Hyung-gu couldn't bear it anymore. His woman had been sexually assaulted by this beast for 2 years. Who would have thought that before dying he would reveal the shocking news that he didn't know his wife was pregnant? So his wife thought that he wouldn't kill her, but unfortunately she didn't know how much he hated children. All of the guys were standing in the front to welcome him after he was released from jail. Also on that day, Korean law officially adjusted the statute of limitations for the Jay case, successfully supplementing the loopholes in Korean criminal law. Thanks for watching.